Guys, welcome to Headline Buster, brought to you by The Point. I'm Wang Guan, sitting in for Liu Xin. In this series, we dissect stories that are making headlines around the world and talk to my guests for the missing pieces of the puzzle. So join us in real time by sending us your comments, questions, suggestions via the CGTN webpage on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or Weibo. If you're watching this live on the CGTN app or on television, email us at thepoint@cgtn.com. Let me know what you think. We start our live streaming every Friday at 11 a.m. Beijing time. Get in touch, and we just might read out your questions. Now, first of all, we've got some social media comments on China's new language policy in Inner Mongolia region, which is today's topic. And this friend, Dr. Okra, said this: the policy is probably legitimate, but the government does not understand how to communicate, persuade, and compromise, but coercion. Essentially, it is due to a lack of respect for common people. Well, this is a very blunt comment, but Laconicus, on the other hand, believes the opposite. He says, or he or she says, the West is failing in its propaganda tirade against China, so it is scrambling to find things to report on, and it is invent human rights violations against ethnic minorities. It is a projection of the mounting issues of racism and white supremacism at home in the U.S. and UK. There are different perspectives over there. Meanwhile, a parent of a first-year student said this: the classes in our children's kindergarten are taught in Mongolian. When I heard that this year's school that used Mongolians as classroom language will use national textbooks for the first time, meaning Mandarin, I was a little worried that the kids were going to have problems adjusting to it. However, learning that the curriculum, teaching materials, and teaching language of other subjects and other grades remain unchanged, I feel much relieved. I'm not too worried about the teachers because the schools always have Chinese classes. Now, this week, we're going to look at how media has been covering China's new curriculum for students in the Inner Mongolia region in northern China. Now, according to the new policy, which went into effect on the first day of school, September the 1st, students entering first grade in schools for minorities will use standard national textbooks for their Chinese language and literature course. This course will also now be taught in Mandarin, the official language of China, of course. Previously, students started taking this course in the second grade. Now, the new policy has triggered rumors that Mandarin will be replacing Mongolian in schools all over the region, or that the new policy is part of a wider campaign to eliminate Mongolian culture from China. The policy is not without its controversies. Let's look at some of its details, though. Here is a class schedule we obtained. As you can see over there, it is for the new semesters of first graders at a local primary school in the city of Ulaanbaatar in Inner Mongolia region in northern China. Each day, as you can see, the school offers one class for Chinese language studies taught in Mandarin and at least one Mongolian language class taught in Mongolian. Other courses like math, science, and the art are still taught in Mongolian. In other words, the existing bilingual education system is still very much in place. No government policy aimed to change that. Now, starting in 2021, courses on ethics and law will be taught to first graders in Mandarin. That is a fact. And in 2022, first graders will also take history courses in Mandarin. That is also a fact. Except for the gradual introduction of these three courses to first graders, the curriculum of other subjects and other graders, as well as textbooks and the language of instruction, will remain unchanged. And the class hours of Mongolian and Korean, another ethnic language used over there, will remain the same. Now, a little background here. Article 19 of China's Constitution did emphasize the promotion of Mandarin as the national language, official language of China. The law of the People's Republic of China on the standard spoken and written Chinese language, another important piece of legislation in China, said similar things, adding that promoting economic and cultural exchange among ethnic groups are important. But bilingual education and cultural preservation is also noted under the same law, which stipulates that all ethnic groups shall have the freedom to use and develop their own spoken and written languages. Let's face it, China is a big country, and with a long history. It is also a multi-ethnic nation. Yes, Han Chinese, like myself, make up over 90% of China's population, but There are also 55 officially recognized ethnic minorities living in China. They have distinct languages, cultures, history, and traditions. There are around 6 million ethnic Mongolians in China, and 4 million of them live in the Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region in northern China, and they're one of the biggest groups. Students can choose to go to schools where Mongolian is primarily used as a language of instruction, or they can go to a Mandarin school where Mandarin is the main language of instruction, or attend schools that teach classes in Mandarin and the Mongolian language is taught as a subject. The system has helped educate bilingual students throughout China, including in other autonomous regions like Guangxi in the south, Ningxia in the west, and Tibet and Xinjiang. Now, defendants of this new policy say it aims to make students more competitive for college placement and future jobs, as well as to make sure courses linked to national identity, such as ethics, history, and law, are consistent. But critics say this is something different, and you get a much more alarming version of the story. And let's look at some of those media reports. First example comes from CNN, which on September 5th published this story: how China's new language policy sparked a rare backlash in Inner Mongolia. The article says under the new law, well, new policy actually, Mandarin Chinese will replace Mongolian as the medium of instruction for 3 subjects in elementary and middle schools for minority groups across the region. True, but some facts are missing here, such as these changes only now apply to the first graders and will be rolled out over the course of 3 years, and that the rest of the classes will still be taught in Mongolian. Now, the way the information is presented makes it sound very dramatic. In case the article did not raise enough concerns, one of the sections is titled Mandarin Replaces Mongolian, which again is eye-catching but not precisely accurate. And then it goes on to say that some ethnic Mongolians also fear that Mongolians will eventually be replaced by Mandarin in all subjects. Critics of China's assimilation policy say Mongolians only need to look at the ethnic minority regions of Xinjiang and Tibet to get a glimpse of what the future might hold. It is true that Xinjiang and Tibet have been using standard national textbooks for these 3 subjects and teaching those courses in Mandarin since 2017 and 2018, but if we want to talk about the future in these regions, we might also look at some figures. Between 2014 and 2018, Xinjiang lifted over 2.3 million people out of poverty. In fact, China says it plans to eradicate poverty by 2020, and education plays a key part in this project. This process includes significant investment in education. For example, in Xinjiang, Xinjiang has become China's first provincial-level region to offer 15-year free education from preschool to high school, instead of the nationwide 9-year compulsory education. Now, some may still raise questions about the so-called erosion of national identity. Well, our show, fortunately, had a chance to talk to some of the Uyghur students in Xinjiang who, have been studying Mandarin from a very early age. Let's listen to what they had to say.
I think learning Mandarin is very important because China is getting more and more influential, and even many foreigners. As a Chinese person, I feel like we must learn this language well. Only through this can we adjust to life in big cities.
Ms. Wang considered this when she started to sponsor us in elementary school. We learn Mandarin Chinese and our native language at the same time. We certainly will not forget our mother tongue.
Well, it is interesting to hear their side of the story. Next up, a Wall Street Journal article from September 3rd says China clamps down on Inner Mongolians protesting new Mandarin language rules. Region's ethnic Mongolians fear Beijing's education policies are phasing out local history and literature, erasing their culture. Again, concerns and fears take the center stage. The article opens not with what the policy is, why it's been rolled out, but rather that Chinese authorities are searching for protesters in Inner Mongolia after a new policy aimed at pushing Mandarin language education across the region sparked widespread unrest among the country's ethnic Mongolians, with many angered by what they saw as a move to erase their culture. It is understandable that families have concerns. Changes can be hard, and perhaps details about the policy itself could have been better explained. But the article centered the whole story around these concerns. No, when the article gets talking about the policy itself, it says, the first phase of the new policy requires all schools to teach Mandarin using national instead of local course materials starting in the first grade, 1 year earlier than under the old system. And then the article follows up with, that means ethnic Mongolian children will not be able to master the fundamentals of their own language before starting their Mandarin studies, according to a clothes seller in Xilinghot, Western Inner Mongolia region. Now, in fact, class hours for Mongolian language learning has not been changed. The language of instruction for math, science, and the art in Mongolian schools are still Mongolian, unless you go to a Mandarin school, like I said earlier. It is a challenge, though, for some students to master 2 languages and become fully bilingual, a challenge that is shared by many students around the world, I assume. Finally, the New York Times on August 31st published the story, Curbs on Mongolian Language Teaching Prompt Large Protests in China. Mongolian is our mother language. Now, the students shouted, according to the article, rights activists say the demonstrations are the biggest in the northern region since 2011. Basically, the same storyline we see repeated in many media outlets. The Chinese government is attempting to erase Mongolian culture. Some students are upset, and rights groups are using the new policy to further their agenda. Now, this article explains the situation like this. Under the new policy, classes would also rely on Chinese textbooks compiled and approved by the government, part of a broader government effort in recent years to standardize curriculum in schools, while the new policy states that the Mongolian language would still be taught to students. The role of Mongolian, though, as a language of instruction, would effectively be diminished in many schools. 2 observations here. Now, using a unified national language in schools is common practice in schools worldwide. Yet when China does it, it's a plot to wipe out non-Han Chinese culture. We've heard that too often, too many times. And when it says the role of Mongolian as a language of instruction would effectively be diminished in many schools, this is also an exaggeration. Yes, Mandarin is the main language of instruction if parents choose to send their kids to Mandarin schools, but Mongolian would be the main language of instruction in Mongolian schools in the region. One point this article highlighted that the others did not is that some families are happy with these changes. The article says the authorities say such policies help ethnic minorities by making it easier for them to integrate into the Han mainstream society. Some ethnic minority parents have welcomed the Chinese language instruction, believing it would better equip their children to compete for coveted spots at Chinese universities and jobs in the Chinese economy. Well, it is true that it is all about perspectives, and while some reports had valid points in their arguments, they missed important details. When we come back, we'll talk to our experts about this issue. Stay tuned.